It started with George Salinger, who works for World up in Scotland. And I think George was looking for stories that had real scale, that said something about Britain today and its sort of place in the world. And that would be exciting. And Fastlane was sitting not far from his office in Glasgow. So I think the seeds of the idea were there, and they did some really great research, which beyond the kind of pleasures of a kind of locked room mystery, kind of brought to life the kind of pressure that those crews are under. And there have been a lot of scandals in recent years with these people who do this incredibly hard work in isolating very tense conditions. And who sort of have to subsume like every other part of themselves while they do that job, doing this kind of twilight existence. And that looked fascinating. That kind of made it suddenly a really human story and not just about this very large submarine carrying nuclear weapons.
Yeah, and the idea of bringing the kind of land and sea together through the characters as well in the story, in terms of you have this, this world going on shore and then this world going on under the sea sort of thing, and bringing those two together and knowing where to get the balance right between the two. Was that kind of fun to explore and research and work out how you would bring those two together and navigating that?
Yeah, I mean, we did a lot of research with people who have served on the Vanguard class submarines, and I think one of the things that I found very moving early on was the fact that people serving on these boats get one message a week from one designated family member that's 100 words or less. It's vetted about 7 times by the Navy for any possible codes. And it's not ever allowed to include bad news. So you go on board knowing that if your partner is killed in an accident or something like that, the first you'll know of it is an hour before you come alongside at the end of the patrol, where you'll be taken aside by the coxswain or the captain or both and sort of told what has happened in your absence. And that's all about keeping crews stable and not creating anything stressful or tense, because of course they can't call home. And as I say, I found that very moving. And then when we were thinking about the characters who needed to go on this boat, and ways in which all of the elements of a submarine and the people who serve on them could be reflected through that, then we looked for a relationship where communication echoes that, where somebody can speak to someone but they can't speak back, and that began to kind of open up the idea of a land-sea dialogue, but where information can really only move one way.
It's amazing what, even in the first episode, what we learn. Like, I had no idea about the whole kind of lack of jurisdiction that there is on the submarine for, the law. And I mean, as the creator and writer of that, and diving into the research that you must have learned, I'm sure you knew a lot going into it, but the things that you learn as you peel back this kind of, but also getting access to that information as well. I mean, Ministry of Defence, there's Secrets Acts and all that kind of thing. Was that kind of tricky to navigate and kind of get to, fact about certain things?
I mean, I think it was difficult. I mean, in terms of our production designer, for instance, no one has released the blueprints for what a Vanguard class submarine looks like because it's classified. So he would sort of talk to one person and say, like, I can't tell you about the whole thing. Well, I'll just tell you about this little bit. And eventually he spoke to enough people. He was like, I know how it works. He sort of like pieced it together. So, a lot of people were justly, very cautious about making sure that they didn't disclose anything. And that's out of a deep loyalty, really, to the Navy and other people serving. But all the same, I think we managed to sort of wangle a relatively accurate picture.
Suranne, congratulations. I mean, this is an amazing, even from the 2 episodes I've seen, it's an incredible character. She's so complex, so many layers to her, kind of just fascinating to watch you explore her journey as well. But what was your how were you introduced to DCI Amy Silva, and what was your reaction to her as a character when you were first introduced to her?
We were just saying, actually, me and Tom had a conversation probably 2.5 years ago, maybe more, because I'd read the script, and the first thing was, I want to fly in a helicopter and land on a submarine. I mean, that was the first thing. And then there's lots and lots of stunty things. And a woman of a certain age, I was like, I can do that, and then I went to World, and we met and we talked about all the different aspects of Amy, because I didn't want anything to get lost, because it's such a busy script content-wise, and because of the land investigation and the underwater investigation, and as you'll see, you have to keep it up with it, because there's a lot of strands to keep on top of, and there's a lot of characters. I mean, this cast is huge and brilliant, brilliantly cast. So we talked, and Tom said something interesting about the relationship between Amy and Kirsten that we delve into as we go, a lot in flashback. Being trapped under the water, and Amy having to face things that she hadn't faced was a really interesting concept for me, on top of it being a really good cop show.
Yeah.
And so from there I went to meet a detective, and the first thing she said is, I mean, would that happen? I was like, firstly, it's drama, so let's just go with this. And she said, well, we'd have a team. I said, I know, but that's the point. She wouldn't have a team. And she's like, oh, God, well, then she'd have to do everything herself. I was like, I know, that's the story. So she's like, oh, wow, okay, well, I guess if you're the only one. So that's another element. I get to do everything that
all the forensic, all that stuff.
With this little kind of camera bag that, I was given, because I said, so what have I got? What do I take down there? And so that was interesting, that she's kind of make, do and mend the whole time. James, our brilliant director, wanted to keep me away from all the Navy team, because my character wouldn't know how
interesting,
it worked down there. So I didn't have to do any research, which was great. Where these guys did. You had a couple of days together, didn't you?
Yeah,
or
a
something?
few days together. Yeah.
So, I mean, a love story. It was said at the beginning, Charlotte said it, a love story, intrigue, death, submarine. What's not to love?
I love that your first thing was, I want to get out, I want to be on that. So I was going to ask you that. Was it like, was that real, and how? You obviously were gagging to do it.
Do you want to know how that was?
No. Just that you did it.
And when I look at it, I'm going, I did that. I'm going to tell myself, it's there on the screen, I did it. Yeah.
Shaun, what about you in terms of, for you as an actor within that role, was there much, research that was available to you, or how did you prepare for it?
Ish. A lot of it is imagination, innit? Everyone does things in a different way. But I suppose for me, I did go and meet some lads in Liverpool, actually, who were submariners. Coxswains, spent the afternoon with them just to see what it was like to chat to them about the specifics of the job, but more really to see what kind of personalities they were, what kind of personality would be required to be that sort of bridge between the two. And then I was just thinking about, like, imagine being away from your family and friends for 90 days, and all those things that Tom said about if some catastrophe happened at home, you wouldn't find out until you were about to leave. All of those things, that's quite wild, isn't it? For me, I couldn't think of anything worse, not being able to go for a walk and get a cup of coffee and have a bit of peace. So all of those things I found really intriguing and interesting. But in terms of research, that was it. But then also we had a couple of days prior to us filming where myself and everyone else on the submarine hung out, and we had an expert with us at most times to say, oh, you wouldn't stand there, you'd stand there, or he was on hand to give us any advice about what we would do. And
What was the reality then of the set? Because it's you kind of feel like that while you watch it, that kind of it's so sensual in terms of you feel it whilst you're watching it, the kind of closeness and her kind of slight anxiety of everything. And when that latch closes as well, you take an extra breath almost in a way. But what was the reality of what you filmed in?
We were in a studio in Glasgow, and I remember the first time we walked on the sets, we were like, oh my God, it was just mind-blowing. And, you know, to work with sets like that, your imagination doesn't have to work too hard. Then we had to stop filming because of COVID. So the second time we went back, that was hard because everyone was in masks suddenly, and we went back really soon after the first lockdown. So the anxiety that was already there working in enclosed spaces. I mean, we took the walls out and stuff to get behind the set, but that was hard and added to the tension. And Tom was just saying no producers were allowed on set then, and so it kind of almost added. And then we swapped directors, and the brilliant Isabel, who's here as well. It was tough, and but you know, thank God we had an amazing cast to kind of rally each other.
Well, fortunate in a way, because the set was huge in terms of scale, but the detail was incredibly specific as well. So Suranne's right, you didn't really have to do a great deal because it was all there for you. But one of the fortunate things about the way COVID turned out is we had the first 3 episodes shot. So we'd had time for us to bond as a group and to sort of have a bit of banter and to know how each other worked and whatnot. And then when we came back, obviously it was completely different. But fortunately, we'd done all of that work prior to it, you know, so that was sort of in the locker in a way.
We holiday mid-season, you know.
Oh gosh! Oh, let's go back to a really small submarine. Yes, so great.
It's fascinating because I think it's you know, the line that Patterson's character Commander Newsom says there when you go about the war. And he says, I wrote it down actually because it's such a great line where he says, oh, you know, that's an illusion. We've always been at war. And it's kind of, it feels like we're watching something like from like the Cold War as from years ago sort of thing. And it's so fascinating that this is present and this is now and this is reflective. I know it's a drama, but it's reflective on a lot of things that are kind of in the atmosphere about, you know, questions about big industries and you know, things that we kind of know about and finding truths and things as well. Was that really important for you, for there to be a kind of focus on that whole idea of distrust of big institutions and questions around that?
I mean, I think certainly the drama allows for a clash of institutions because you have the police and the Navy and the security services, all of whom are charged with protecting the country and its people. And in a way, you also have the peace camp. And their view is that, you know, if they progress their cause, then that is to protect everyone as well. So you have a lot of people all trying to do roughly the same thing without each other knowing, or being so deeply at odds about how they go about that. So that was certainly of interest. And in terms of what you were saying about the sort of submarines feeling like a Cold War artifact, you know, I was surprised to learn during the course of the research how much money is being spent on submarines again. And I think in the next 10 years, they are going to dominate again in a way that we haven't thought about for a while. It's in large part, I mean, I could and probably need to be restrained from talking for half an hour about it, but sort of missiles are problematic after a while because they can be shot down. So Russia just spent hundreds of billions creating a nuclear torpedo that can pilot itself across the world, and it's designed to explode in harbors and send a radiated tidal wave. For a long time, NATO thought that this was just a fiction, and they're like, oh no, we've got pictures of it. It's sort of out there, it exists now. And sort of China, India, they're all investing huge amounts of money in submarine warfare, in part as well because the polar ice is melting, and there's a sort of grab for resources and territory in that area. So I think it's a curious area where something that feels like it was born of a historic moment in time is swinging back into sharp focus, and there are inevitable questions about, well, where does Britain sit in that as a player at the table, or what is in the national interest?
Is it important for you as a writer to almost kind of not question your audience, but have your audience watch and ask questions from what they watch?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to write something that was, sort of tub thumping for a single side. of the issue. And really, I mean, the thing that I was most drawn to, even beyond the sort of geopolitical stuff, was just sort of how mythical these machines are. It's you look back at all of those kind of stories of people swallowed by whales and journeys into the underworld, and these machines, they take a bunch of people who have busy lives, lovers, children, etc., and they get on board something that floats, and then suddenly it disappears, and it is invisible. And with that, everyone tries to put aside their old life, and they suddenly just wear the kind of mask they need to wear to get through the patrol. They sleep. You have 6-hour shifts, so you only ever get 4.5 hours sleep at a time. There's no day and night. So everything becomes bewildering, and people just try and hang on to duty and role, and leave aside all the personal stuff. And that's what I was really interested in exploring, sort of which human bits, which naughty bits, once that mask is fractured, what happens. And of course, with Amy's arrival and what goes on the boat, all of those rhythms, those expectations, the kind of metronome of drills and lunch and sleep, drills, lunch, sleep, is completely broken. And then we get to see what sort of lies beneath those people, as it were.
I think that's the bold thing about the show, is that so aside from the political aspects, it is about the human stories that, and like I said, it's so busy with content that Tom and his team have managed to fully realise the story of the coxswain, my story, Rosie's story on land, a backstory of a relationship that's in itself is quite a tricky thing to fully realise, especially on its own, even if and we had to do it as like a secondary storyline. But by the time you get to Isabel's episodes, it becomes fuller. So I think that, it's a bold show, as in it's a Boise kind of thriller, but with 2 female leads at the heart of it. It has a romantic story, and it has the that element of the thrills that come through to the last episode are amazing, and quite shocking. So it's a really bold task that I think World and BBC have tried to do. Whether all the elements are right, I don't know, but I think it's I've not seen something like this before, with all of that given to an audience.
How do you write the episodes? How do you put all that? How do you do it? But in terms of the episodic nature of it, and we see the end of that first episode, and it just leaves you wanting more. Second episode, the same. It's that kind of thing of this, and they're like they're like feature films really in terms of the scope of them as well. But kind of knowing how to kind of arc each episode so that you start and end with this, with a of how you want the audience kind of feeling when they leave, sort of thing. How do you do that?
Well, thankfully it wasn't just me, because when you put it that way, that's really difficult. There were another couple of writers, Ed and Chandni, but also a really great and experienced team from World. And as you know, they've made Bodyguard and Line of Duty and many other shows besides. So there was a lot of experience in the room in trying to figure out how to balance those elements. But really our sort of starting point was, which I think really helped, was along with this depth of research about how submarines work and everything that can go wrong, and a lot of experts from places like Chatham House who are telling us about the sort of political sort of framing of submarines at the moment. Along with that, there was a really early focus on, it's almost like the psychological feel of a submarine. And we sort of talked about how all of those elements come together. The fact that it is like a town that vanishes. It has, as I said earlier, those kind of mythic, that mythic feel. and sort of everything about them is generative of story and character, really. For instance, every submarine has a crush depth. There's a point at which the hull fails. They can't simply scud on to the bottom, and so they, even within the ocean, they exist in this really specific zone of sort of deep enough not to get caught or hit, and not too deep to find the hull creaking and crushing. And if you're after kind of metaphors for characters under stress, then it's a world that is full of them. And so we looked at that stuff early on, just how submarines felt and how weird they were, and what it might stand for in terms of people trying not to transform and having their environment exert that kind of pressure on them. But we spent a long time in the room figuring our way through those things.
That seems to me as well that might be a good description of Grover as well, Shaun, in terms of you sort of meet him and you're like, oh, he's a nice man. Yeah. And then, I don't know, I'm not that sure about him, to be honest. I'm like, I have my doubts kind of creeping in there a wee bit. But that's kind of, you hold back with that, which is really brilliant, I imagine, for an actor, in terms of there's a lot to him that we don't know yet, even in the first or the second episode as well. Yeah,
sure. I mean, I think as it goes on as well, until it finishes. Yeah, definitely interesting for an actor if you've got something to play which is not out there. But also, I suppose for me, I'm slightly more attracted to those people who are not immediately everything is available, those who it takes a while, you're not quite sure, they're always the most interesting to me to hang with, and also therefore to play as well.
Yeah. In terms of that, of the cast, which is amazing, do you write with cast in mind when you're writing? Or...
Well, I mean, Suranne was the first person we talked to, and obviously, I mean, you've worked with Simon Heath on a few bits and pieces as well. But I mean, it was certainly like an early conversation of going, well, there's a lot of story to cover, so you're going to need someone who can do an awful lot extremely well and with a real intensity. So we certainly talked about Suranne immediately, and we're thrilled and grateful that she took it on. I mean, it looked like it was also going to be a tough shoot. I mean, that set, which first director James will be annoyed if I don't mention, I think is the largest ever fixed lighting rig built in Scotland.
Right. Wow.
But it was built in two big bits, and there wasn't much daylight down there, so that was always going to be tough as well. So we're grateful in many ways.
I love that you filmed in Scotland.
Suranne was extraordinary as well, by the way, I have to say. So many times where it was like she would just be a warrior and crack on out the helicopter, putting the stuff on. She was like an amazing leader of the team, I would say.
Thank you. Thank God you both been nice. And thank God you said I was the first person you spoke to. Can you imagine if you said, well, we spoke to this actress and she said no. So we got to...
They were busy.
Yeah. I think the whole team, just because we got on so well that everyone was just like, right, what can we do? How can we help? What's next? I think it was really, and you don't always get that on shows, but we had a sub WhatsApp group. And when the land found out that we had a WhatsApp group, they were really pissed off. They were like, we haven't got a WhatsApp group. I was like, no, we're all really tight. But you kind of had to be. I think it just, I think the story gives, to that atmosphere of us as actors, wanting to be tight. And there was a lot of stunts, besides the helicopter thing, as we went on. And I did get whiplash at one point, but other than that, it all looks good.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if the set was, it's kind of, because it's all pipes and stuff in a real submarine. Was it kind of, you imagine that thing of tapping it with a pen, and you hear that kind of clanging noise sort of thing. But were they, or was it kind of slightly more friendly, or kind of so that
don't touch it too hard
when you're thrown into it, that you're not actually going to give yourself kind of concussion?
Yeah, no, it was. I think you might have broke a phone at one point when you took it off a wall.
Oh yeah,
Maybe.
Classic. Don't know my own strength.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're all kind of, but there's physical elements to it when we see at the end of episode 1, you know, in terms of things going wrong within the sub sort of thing. So, you know, people are getting through, even the chef, you know, the cook lady, I could tell her trauma at one point, you know, with the little look on her face sort of thing. And that's the great thing as well. Even these kind of characters that you know nothing about that pop up, the way that it's kind of shot and the way that you see them in frame and with the other characters, you can learn so much about them even just within a shot. It's brilliant.
That, actually, you just saying about that was quite a fun thing, because obviously when we can't move the set like that, so it has to be a camera tilt, and the camera tilts one way and we fall the other way or something. So that was quite...
It's like a dance routine.
It was that more like Carry On Sub until we got it right. I threw myself on the floor, do you remember? And they was like, no, you don't have to throw yourself on the floor. You just have to like rock
So it makes you really goes for it.
Yeah. I was so embarrassed. I was like, I'll go, and I don't know how to. But that became like quite a fun thing. So it's like the camera's going to tilt now. So every time we did that, it was, but it looks amazing.
Yeah.
You know, when you're doing it, you feel ridiculous. But it does, like, once the music's on and stuff. And, you know, we were acting to a lot of green screen at certain points. So, I mean, the effects are just great.
Oh, wow. I had no idea there was green screen at all. It's like...
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, the work they've done.
Did you have to have like not a choreographer or a kind of movement to you know, set out those movements and stuff so that you were all in sync with how it would be moving? Because
we kind of just
went with the flow.
Yeah, we went with the flow. Yeah. I think if you look close enough, you'll probably see a couple of out of time. But
go the wrong way.
Yeah, that'll do. No, I think that was down to James and Matt, our DOP, who just knew what they were doing, and they set up the rhythm of all of that brilliantly.
Rose is a great character as well. Her character, she's brilliant.
Yeah, she sent a lot. By the way, she texted me before.
I love how I just there's amazing. I'm really interested to find out more about her character as the series goes on as well, and where she takes it, because there's you write great female characters, you really do. You know, in terms of even, you know, I think all the females that we've been introduced to on the show as well. There's just kind of great depth to them all as well, and even the reference to the female place within the sub as well, and how that's kind of touched on in a few moments as well. That's not really a question. I just wanted to compliment you on writing great female characters. Is it I don't know. Do you think about that when you're writing, whether you're writing a female or a male character? Is it differentiated or you know?
I mean, I certainly think in this show, wanted a character who is sort of, as you know, made to feel like an outsider. And the truth of these submarines is that, you know, it is half a dozen women and a lot of men, and they're traditionally very male worlds as well. So for a female detective to step into that space, you know, there is a novelty for even with the female officers to an extent, and you know, that was appealing there. No, it sort of, I mean, I suppose I don't think too hard about it. I just sort of write them as the characters, I guess. It doesn't feel like something I agonize over, certainly.
Yeah, not everyone can write good female characters, but you know, you kind of, it's brilliant. Shaun, I want you to describe Grover to me. How would you describe him?
Glover. It's he. How would I describe him? Oh, it's difficult, isn't it, though? I suppose he's someone who reveals more about himself as it goes along, but I think you don't want to. I don't want to spoil anything by saying.
You know
what I mean? I don't want to spoil by saying he's actually really good. Yeah, he's actually really terrible. But I think he's actually just a human being doing his thing.
Yeah.
You know, in a really tense situation and trying to do his duty to the submarine and to the chain of command on the submarine, but also trying to be a good guy and help this person who's clearly out of their depth there as well, you know, and doesn't have all the cards, I don't think. So, yeah.
It was good because that kind of like logged Amy's experience. It seeped it in, you know, something she could really hold on to in this relationship. You know, we got on like a house on fire, which is brilliant. And because the other fascinating thing is a character that has authority who loses all authority, and then what are you without your job? Which again is something we can all kind of resonate with at the moment, is discovering then what do you have if there's no resources around you and there's no human connection, you know, and you're going through you know, questioning your own relationships as well. So that was good for us once we'd found that, we could really relax into our scenes, and you know, they were some of my favourite scenes. I'm saying that because you sat there. No, they were brilliant.
Were you encouraged to do any improvisation at all? Because your character in particular, Amy, has the kind of those scenes that are almost kind of like mini plays where she's doing her kind of interrogation of different characters on the sub in different situations, and they're amazing to watch, just in terms of the kind of power play between the individuals, and I just wondered whether they feel so natural and they feel so conversational, that whether you were kind of encouraged to kind of play with them a bit, or whether you stick to script. Or
so I knew Adam, who plays EXO from that's our 5th job, I think, and so I think that really helps. You can make something that would normally be on paper quite dry, or could be quite dry, into something that you can really bounce off. So I think that helped. I think that's what. But no, none of it was improvised. I mean, you know, George was always there. If there was any script questions, or you know, can I do this instead of this, or can we, you know, so you know, we'd check and change if we wanted to or needed to. But I think it's the bond of the actors that is really special on this particular job.
Did you get much rehearsal at all, or was...
No, we didn't, did we, with any scenes? I mean, particularly after COVID, it was literally like, you know, let's talk about the scene quick, shoot it, okay, and move on. And there's a immediacy and an urgency to that, which Isabel just knew what she wanted, and we all trusted her, and we were like, okay, got it. And she was like, yep, got it, move on. We were like, great. You know, and it gets trickier, and there's some huge set pieces that she did an amazing job on. As you've seen, you've not seen it yet, have you?
No,
but I mean, God, brilliant. So, yeah, I think the immediacy of this. I don't know about the land stuff, but yeah, we didn't have much time, did we, to rehearse? Just bounce off each other.
What do you want people to kind of take away from the? So it's a really weird question, but what would you like people to take away from the series?
I think I ended up with a real respect for the people who do this job, and a real appreciation of the cost to them, you know, to their family lives, in particular those with families. I think that's probably something a lot of people can relate to in a new framing in the last 18 months. I you know, with both Shaun and Suranne's characters, there's a kind of a challenge between the role that they play in the world and perhaps their internal sense of themselves, and their fractures there, which I think sort of fits very well with a kind of land and sea. There are the hidden parts of yourself, and you know, Glover as a character, I think, you know, endeavors to be a good man in both parts of his life, but they feel like different lives. There is a life lived below the sea, and then there's a life on land when when he's asked to play a different role. And I hope audiences will sort of connect to that over time, and maybe, you know, perhaps ask that sort of question of themselves about sort of which person they present to the world, which part of themselves feels like the person who's dutiful and who is trying to be loyal and decent and do their job. And if there is another part of them that sort of is several meters down and struggling to be heard and harder to see. So I hope that resonates. And I just hope people are scared. That as well.
I hope people are scared. I love that you love the stunt work. That's brilliant. I like that. Can you just have more stunt work, please? More stunt work, please.
I did have a brilliant, brilliant stunt woman, and she would just sit at the side and go, "Am I doing? No, okay, you're doing it." Yeah. Rachel, and she was great, and so she let me do a lot of that. I think it's a fun, besides from everything we're saying and the depth of the scripts, it's really good ride, and that's what I've done lots of different types of programs this year or last year, filmed different kinds. And for me, this was the one that's kind of, I've not done this kind of show before. Yeah. So I'm just like, it's really entertaining. It's really great. And it has all the levels too, but, I just want people to enjoy it,
Yeah. I can't wait to see the rest of it. I'm so excited. Please, no spoilers for anyone, particularly the death. Okay. Shh. Thank you so much for your time tonight. It's so great to talk to you about it, and it is absolutely fascinating and entertaining, and I can't wait to watch the rest of it. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our wonderful panel. Thank you so much.